I am DM Zone. This is Gamer's Oasis. Let's get into this. Okay, guys, I've tried a little bit something different. I'm going to have the mic hanging at some point in time or something. I'm not quite satisfied with the setup yet. But this is a little bit better. I'm a little bit farther away from the camera. I feel like this fits the frame a little bit more. Let me go ahead and talk real quickly about what I'm doing here. Okay, so I'm going to be starting a new series. This is going to be a sort of a passion project. Has a lot to do with Dungeons and Dragons and this type of stuff in my homebrew. I've been playing this particular homebrew for over 20 years, so this is a very long. I've done a live campaigns over live editions. I played third in there, played a brief amount of four, not really, but a little bit. I've played fifth edition and that type of stuff, and I've gone all the way back to BX and some AD&D first edition actually in this same setting. So I have a live experience in this particular world. I call it my homebrew world. I call it Tunda, Tunda. And now I'm going to be doing it in a solo format where a lot of the games I'm going to be playing are going to be solo to try and develop parts of my world so that whenever I run my actual game, whatever edition I'm running, I will have more stories to draw upon that I can just throw in with my actual homebrew game. Who knows where this is going to be? If there's a lot of interest in it, maybe I'll post some stuff or something like that. I'm not sure I'm going to have that kind of interest. I'm just doing it because this is something I enjoy. This is something I want to do. It actually goes against most of the content I've done for the last year, but this is the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons. DM is literally in the name of my channel. So I feel like I need to, if I'm going to make a push towards Dungeons and Dragons or towards roleplay games, I feel like I need to do it now. And that's what I'm doing with this. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit more about it. Okay, so like I said, this is going to be a solo campaign of original Dungeons and Dragons, or more of my version of the adaptation of original Dungeons and Dragons. Now you might wonder, why am I being so specific on that? Well, part of the reason is it's really hard to play original Dungeons and Dragons straight out of the white box and have a complete game. It really is not a complete game. It requires chainmail, which I have. It requires outdoor survival, which I literally have the physical copy of. And you know, there's still a lot of gaps. Part of the problem that this game runs into is that original Dungeons and Dragons points you to chainmail. Chainmail was made before original Dungeons and Dragons was made, so nothing in chainmail points you to where you need to go in chainmail. It points you to a war game. It teaches you how to play the game as if it's a war game. That's not helpful when you're trying to play a role-play game. Matter of fact, role-play was so far away from the concept of what's in original Dungeons and Dragons that the word role-play game or role-play or RPG is in no copies of the white box. None of the supplements have it. So how can I make this work? That's why a lot of times you see people talk about the way they believe it works or the way they've heard this was. What's true about this is one of the main reasons why AD&D first came about was because there was no two tables that played original Dungeons and Dragons the same, and they wanted to take this to a tournament, and there was no way you're going to do that, where you had one table that rolled that didn't roll hit points. They had hit dice, so you would roll a hit, that's a death. You have a hit dice +1. You roll a hit, you get a save throw of a 1+ on a d6, and you survive. Or maybe you have hit dice. Maybe you use the standard d6 hit dice. Maybe you have a variable hit dice. So if you're a fighter using the standard, it's a d6 +1. If you are a wizard, it's a d6. In the variable, a fighter has a d8 and a wizard has a d4. So there's a lot of those type of things. There were no rogues in original Dungeons and Dragons. That was something that was adapted later by people who played the game who thought there was a real hole in it. And they came back in the first supplement in Greyhawk and said, we now have rogues. but the rogue wasn't fully detailed there, so they had to come back in the Cyclist supplement and kind of throw the assassin in there and throw some more stuff in there to kind of round out the rogue a little bit. These versions of the game came out rapidly once the game came out, striking the iron while it's hot, shall we say. So there wasn't a lot of editing yet, even though Tim Cass, an amazing guy, from everything I've been able to tell. I'm actually friends with him on Facebook, though he's not very talkative on Facebook. But he was an editor, and he started to make editing things and trying to wrangle in some of the ideas of creative minds that didn't necessarily know how to make a D&D book or a gaming book. Not that anyone really knew back in those days probably how to do it. I think people have a much better understanding of how these things go. I referred to it in prior videos, which I'll get into in a second, about the polish of 50 years of making these things and how much better. Okay, so what books am I using? What systems am I using? Well, that's going to be a little bit hard. Some of these things might change here and there. Some of these things might change with time. Right now, I'm kind of looking at using the 3 core books from the white box set, the chainmail rules, and the outdoor survival in situations when I'm traveling in the wilderness. I'm not going to be doing it verbatim in the outdoor survival unless I'm using non-player characters. I might start doing some of that with that. However, I'm going to have to figure out how to interpret chainmail into this. There are 4 different systems between chainmail and original Dungeons and Dragons. There's the alternative system, which is the one that ended up taking off later, which I'm going to do. If I ever do this in a different edition, I want to save that for that because I understand the THACO system very well. And I feel like it's a good way, and then eventually I'll go to Ascending, and I feel like that's just a natural progression of future videos. So I'm going to be using one of the chainmail methods. In the chainmail method, you have what they call the 20:1 or the mass combat rules. Then you have fantasy combat, and then you have the man-to-man combat. So I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of the mass combat or the 20:1 or 20:1. I probably will do that if I ever do like large-scale combats, if we ever get to that point, or if I ever have like the party taking part in a larger scale combat where whatever's happening. I feel like that's probably a good idea. But frankly, heroes are either so overpowered or so easily wiped out. That's not something I necessarily want to have happen in a large-scale combat. You kind of lose the personal connection when you get in a larger scale. So I'm going to be looking at mostly the fantasy system and the man-to-man system. So let's talk about those 2 systems real quickly. Those are both 2d6 systems, or basically 2 to 12. There are some variables, there are some bonuses. Stats really don't play a whole lot to this, but they do apply here. These systems are definitely different, but very close to the same. The way they're different is back when they made original Dungeons and Dragons, there was just some, not historically, but mythologically powerful creatures that could not be taken down by normal people, by naturally, you know what I'm saying? Examples of this you would find in other ways of it being wrote would be like wights or vampires. They require a certain type of weapon, silver, these type of things. Same thing with lycanthropes. It requires more than just a man with a sword to be able to do that. In this version, it actually came down literally to the man holding the sword. So when you start out as a level 1 fighter, magic user, or cleric, because again, in the original core books, there was no rogue. There was later. You were considered to be one man in the 20:1 scale. So you were not a hero until you were 4th level. Hero is actually a line on the chart for fantasy, for the fantasy weapon chart. There's hero, there's superhero, and then there's wizard. And those were the 3 upgrades from man. If you were a man, you didn't actually have a place on the fantasy chart. Nothing on the fantasy chart you could kill. You're not killing basilisks, you're not killing chimeras, you're not killing giants, you're not killing trolls or any of these things until you're like 4th level. Well, considering you can run into these things prior to 4th level, you had to figure out some what ifs. And if you had a magic weapon, well, you had to really figure out some what ifs. And the game kind of goes into how like 4 men actually counts as a hero. So you get 1 attack as a hero, yada, 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 and that type of stuff. And there were some other ones where maybe you couldn't kill the troll, but you could render it unconscious, but you couldn't actually do final death to that or a vampire unless you were a proper hero. And I kind of like that aspect and element of it. That's why I'm going to keep the fantasy chart there. But, you know, at the same time, we're going to need the man-to-man. The problem is none of the monsters in the D&D books are wrote for the rules for man-to-man. Oddly enough, they're wrote in the 20-to-1 or in the alternative D20 system to hits and all that. Part of that is it's a little bit confusing, a little hard to figure out what their armor class is. You see, in a man-to-man, whether you have a shield or not makes a difference. Whether you're wearing chain versus plate makes a difference. It's not the number, it's how you get there that makes a difference. They had a little bit of AD&D first edition weapon to armor class, and they had a little bit of weapon speed in there when they talk about actual weapon class, not like weapon to armor class type of thing, but like the actual weapons that you're using. A dagger to plate mail, it needs a 12 unless that person is prone, and then it needs a 7. And then you can actually coup de grace with it with a 7 higher. So there are a lot of those type of things you have to take into consideration. And I feel like that's going to be very dynamic. It also allows someone with a fast weapon to attack faster than a person with a larger weapon, allowing them to potentially do more damage, especially if they have a strength bonus. It also means that slower weapons tend to go first, which is backwards for most people. There's logic to it, or not to say a slower weapon, but a higher class weapon, which tends to be great swords and pole arms, which are slower weapons as we would know it, but they have more reach. So they go first on the first round. And then on the second round, they suffer the consequences of being so slow. And fast weapons tend to rule the day in that situation. But anyways, I'm digressing. But there's a lot of rules that came out in like the supplement 2 with the Blackmore supplement that I'm not going to be using. Things like to hit location. I feel like I got enough on my plate right now. If I have something particular happen, I think I will do that. They're not so you hit 0, you're dead, because I do have if you roll the hit dice and you're a hit dice +1, you get the save. So I think I'm still going to do that. What I'm probably going to do is if you roll your hit dice, if you fall to 0, you're going to roll a d6 on a 1 in 6 chance. You're going to just be at 0 hit points and be unconscious. If you have a +2 con, then it'd be a 2 in 6. And if you have an 18 con with a +3, you're going to have a 3 in 6. And then if you get hit again, you're just dead. But at least give you a chance to potentially survive if you're a high con character. I feel like that's important and really shows the hardiness of a high constitution character, considering how rare that is, because you're not able to increase that and you're not able to move those stats. You either roll it or you don't when you're making your character. So that's like an adaptation I'm going to do, sort of what I feel like the spirit of the rules are trying to say. I'm going to be using the alternative strength modifier that is found in the supplement 1 and 2 for fighters. If you have a 17 strength magic user for whatever reason, you're not going to get the bonuses of a 17 strength, but if you have a 17 strength fighter, you're going to get the bonus. And that's just kind of what it is. Fighters are meant to do more damage. So that's going to be the same thing as an elf if they are fighting. If they're a magic user, then they're going to lose that extra little bit of strength. If you're a dwarf or a halfling, you're going to get that strength bonus. And so that's why you have certain things like level caps. Level caps do occur for demi-humans. The halfling and the fighter is going to be able to multi-class once they get to their cap or whenever they want. And then they'll be able to continue on. So a halfling, I think, caps at 4. So yeah, when he gets to a level 4 fighter, then he'll become a thief or whatever, a rogue, and then he's limitless on that, being able to go all the way up and be able to do more things. A fighter can go ahead and become a different thing, and then, thief or whatever, and then he'll have some levels of that, and then so on and so on. Elves are considered multi-class from level 1, and they level up evenly. The way I'm working elves, I talk about in my elf video, so look for that video coming up, not next, but after that one. And I will talk more about that in that particular video where I'm talking about a lot of the problems and hiccups that elves run into in original Dungeons and Dragons. So I poured over the 3 books in the white box set. And like I said, the monsters aren't wrote for man-to-man. This means that the first big thing I'm doing, the first big adaptation I'm doing, is I'm literally going to create an old original Dungeons & Dragons monster manual. I'm going to be placing the creatures in alphabetical order. I'm actually going to be subcategorizing them by what they are. So I am going to move men towards the word of folk. I just feel like that's maybe a little bit more modern terminology, and I think that's just a better way to go. For sure, back then they referred to men as women, so I don't know. I think this would be in the spirit of what Gygax would think. The reason why I say that is literally he has non-combatants all through the game. He has women and children within the game. He does tend to label them as non-combatants, but there are times when the females are combatants, particularly certain races which tend to have a reverse their matriarchies versus patriarchies. They did have Amazons as literally a race in the chainmail rules. So I don't feel like there was any ill will towards women in that nature. So I believe this is literally 100% in the spirit of what Gygax was saying back in the day, and will work very well moving forward. So when I get to folk, I'm going to be talking about all the different types of folk there are, whether it's berserkers, nomads, or patriarch, or lords, or bandits, or brigands, or pirates, or buccaneers, or whatever. It doesn't matter. There's a huge list of those folk, per se, wizards, for example. And the way they have it detailed works in a very wargamey type of way. You have to remember when they were doing their play testing, not only were they using the books they had there, but they also had another game called Brownstein. And I have videos for Brownstein, for Dungeon, the board game, and for Chainmail. And you can find links to all that up in the top right-hand corner where I have made videos already on those things. And part of the reason why Gygax didn't really get into Brownstein, I feel like, is because it brought in the element of role play. While they did that at their table, they did treat it much more as a war game, and he really didn't want to go near the concept of a role play game, because a role play game was literally something that was used by doctors and psychiatric people, or whatever they might be, people that help people get through things like phobias or traumas and this type of stuff, where they would role play a person being successful in the situation or doing something that they themselves had difficulty doing. and then they would be able to experience it without them having to personalize it. And it was often done in group where they would try and talk. So like seminars on how to sell things, these type of things. Um, you would see these type of things with actors, learning how they would take on the character either on stage or in movies. And this wasn't what Gygax had in mind. He had something different in mind. I don't think it was, I think it was more of like from a novelist type of perspective, where you'd read a book and you'd go there in your mind and you daydream about that thing. You weren't actually acting out the characters per se. You might change your voice, but I think that's closer to what Gygax was doing versus trying to be more method on all these other things. The whole removing of himself from the game so that your mind could wander was what he did. For those who don't know, he actually played hidden behind a filing cabinet where he would be able to look out at you, but you wouldn't be able to see him, his notes, or any of his world stuff. And you would just see a drawer push back, him put some stuff out, and then the drawer go back out. And then he would describe the setting and the world and all these things. And it was meant that because you wouldn't see him, you would always be in the mental space of your character type of thing. And that was kind of like a thing he did. Now, I could get way off track here, but let's just try and keep it focused on what I'm talking about here. I'm starting a solo original Dungeons & Dragons game. It is the world of Tunda. It is my homebrew, like I said, for over 20 years. Started when 3rd edition came out. It was based on prior campaigns and games I played on different editions. Prior to that, mostly AD&D 2nd edition. Most of my campaign has been in the middle, the west, and the north of the South Kingdom. I've had several multi-year campaigns that have played out in different places like the village of North Pike, the capital city of Brokenwar, the forest of Eternal Winter, the jungles of Blue Mist, the desert of Thirst, and several other smaller locations like that. I'll try and put a picture of it up real quick so you can take a look at it. But for my solo game, I'm going to be focusing more on the eastern half of this continent and then to the south where there are other things. There are lots of things to explore here. There's the border road, which has on it Tatum Falls, Heroes Rest, Axe Head Tower, Franklin's Tower, Crestwood, very important to remember Crestwood. Bridgewater Monastery has settlements of different sizes. They say village on them right now, but whether they remain a village or become a town, I haven't fully decided. To the more central part of the Southern Kingdom, there is the Castle of High Manor. There is within the Silver Hills. There is the ruins of Silvermoor with its water that has some sort of metallic sheen to it, and seems to be toxic and poisonous to those who enter it, creating some very unusual mutated creatures, mostly undead, that live within these marshlands, these moors. And there's also the Whitestone ruins, which are old ancient ruins made from a different era that are made completely from ivory white stones that have since seen the ages of time come to ruin. Very little of the actual non-stone structure remains. It's very ancient. And then there's the ever-shrinking forest of Spikedale, which used to be so big that would almost touch. An elf could walk from Spikedale to Banedale, the southern reaches of Banedale, without ever even being seen. However, now the capital city of Brokenwar is basically at that junction, and has pushed back on both those forests. What's interesting, though, is the elves aren't necessarily too offended by the fact that the humans have made their capital city there, because they helped make the capital. So why they did that is not fully known in these days. But they are not happy with how small their forests have become and that type of thing. To the north of the southern kingdom, in the middle of the continent essentially, there is absolutely the most massive body of unified lands, I guess you could say, which is all fairly neutral. It's referred to as the Green Void, and it's big. It's a massive, big, open plains of green grass that basically is like a shimmering ocean of grass and that type of stuff, with the occasional tree or brush. But those don't tend to last long or really exist within the Green Void, and why that is not fully known. What is known is there is a very large nation of basically tribal state run nomadic barbarians, which are mostly human. There are rumored to be feral barbaric halflings and secretive elves that live within mystical boundaries within the Green Void, hidden away from time and everything around them, essentially. But those aren't fully known or understood. Also in the middle of the Green Void is the nation of the Tinker Gnomes. I do have gnomes that tinker and build things. They live in an island in the middle of the Green Void. From the south border to the north border, it would take you 3 months to cross. So the likelihood is people in the Southern Kingdom have never met a Tinker Gnome in their life, because that's not gnome marching. That's human walking or riding on horseback to be getting across that part. So yeah, there's a lot out there that is truly unknown because of the massive scale of that. To the northeast, there's a large group of orcs and other foul creatures that live in the mountains and forests to the northeast. To the northwest is another batch of mountains that was once the homeland of the mountain dwarves, which have been severely crushed during what was known as a rage of dragons, led by a dragon that was simply known as the World Eater. The World Eater was supposedly slain, and you can find his runes out in the Green Void if you are lucky or unlucky enough to be in that section. They say that the bones still hold mystical energies from that period of time. But the mountain dwarves faced the wrath of these dragons and were reduced in numbers all the way down to about 50 at best count at one point in time. And now they are displaced from their homes. In these dwarven ruins are now other foul creatures like trolls and goblins and orcs that now fill these once grand halls. And the dwarves are slowly trying to reclaim and retake their halls back as their numbers grow. They tend to not want adventurers' aid, as adventurers tend to want to ransack and pillage the halls, and the dwarves have within them the desire to keep what is theirs, even if they are in such a reduced number. So yeah, there's a great amount of history and lore and flavor that 20 years of writing your own game does. And I'm basically wanting to continue this. So let me go ahead and get into how this is going to work. So the starting location for all this is going to be Crestwood. Whether it's going to be a larger village or a town, I'm not 100% sure. Crestwood is just north of the Bridgewater Monastery, and that's going to be a location for the party to go to. So is the next towns over. But there's going to be several small hamlets, communities, villages, hideaways, whatever you want to call it, towers, within that area that are not mapped. These are going to be areas I'm going to roll randomly. I'm going to populate. I'm going to create lineages and all these things that go with it. And we're going to be exploring as we go. We're going to be coming up with family names, history, lores. I'm going to be doing stories with NPCs. There's a whole lot of how the sausage is going to be made, shall we say. No one wants to see that. They just want to see the final product. Some of that stuff might be offered if there's a large demand for it, maybe. If I do something with Patreon, which I'm considering, or that type of stuff, a lot of the NPC stories, like how they come about, the actual PC's background histories, and this type of stuff, I think would be a good thing for that too. Something that not everyone wants to know, but if you're an enthusiast of what's going on, or if you're invested in knowing what's going on with Osgard. Osgard is going to be the rogue in the party, and you want to maybe know how Osgard has this phobia or this fear or this personality trait they have, and you want to know this. Well, then maybe you want to watch the backstory. I don't know. If that's a thing you want to do, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll make that a stronger push to get that out. Maybe doing like a monthly schedule release where I do so many a month for those who participate in that. Probably going to be doing that through Patreon though, as I said, just because it makes more sense in that way. But I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll just, if there's a huge amount of interest, maybe I'll just put it on the channel itself, and that would be the thing I do. I'm working from a very creative approach where I have the foundation structure. I'm going to be doing it in this edition. I'm going to be doing these adaptions. I'm going to be using these systems. But then where it goes, the direction it goes, who lives, who dies, all that's going to be kind of random and completely out the window. I don't know. I'm going to be doing sort of an oracle system where I roll dice to figure out a lot of things. I'm going to have if you're watching the live stream, which I'll be doing through a Twitch channel called Zone Plays Games, I'll have a link for it down below, where you can really watch the sausage being made. I might sit there for 5 minutes and just think on how I'm going to do this next step. Now, the edited version of that will be what I post on this channel, and that's going to be different. That's going to be, hopefully a 25-ish to probably 50-minute video, and these videos are going to come out every week. I'll probably batch make the video and then edit them down and then get released, and they'll be coming out on a standard thing. I'll probably do 6-month seasons, so where I might change what I'm doing and where I'm going at the end of that season to jump into another story that I feel like is very important. Time is going to be very critical, so I'm going to be running the same time on multiple things where different events might be happening, but you're going to be running with a party for that. I don't know if I'm going to change party or if I'm going to just run those events, and then at the end of the 6 months I'll do a bonus episode where I talk about how other parties did other things or how other events in the game did that, or maybe I'll just do that as like the sausage being made and you can watch those and then you'll see the final video. I don't know how all that's going to go. I just know that one video a week is not going to be enough for me to get the story the way I want it. And I also know that I don't necessarily have time to make 4 videos a week right now, because I am doing 50% of my videos in the Entropy universe still, to be able to get this out the way I would want to. So I probably will leave some of that just on the cutting room floor, as they say, or not even recorded and just take down notes and then have this story that I tell. If you have any ideas how best do you think this would be received, how I do this in one part probably will not be how this happens all the way through, just because I'm going to be learning literally as I go. Like I said, I'm taking a creative thought process on this and trying to be very open to how things come and go and the direction things travel. I do have some stories I want to tell. I don't know which one I'm going to do. I don't know if the party is going to go to certain places. But I spoke about the ruins. Those are known locations within the world. I'm going to have NPCs that have things they want done. Those will be kind of like pre-made adventures. These are adventures that I made probably years ago that I'm going to be running for potentially this thing. There are going to be overarching stories that might be running in the background that I could do that kind of describe the world. So I don't know what direction, how long it's going to take, when it gets there. I'm not trying to play what they call like a SAG game, which is an acronym. I'll let you figure that out on your own. But I am trying to kind of take it at my own pace, shall we say. I'll go more into that as we go. So look for future episodes, future videos, and every now and then I'm just going to have like a extra behind the scenes type of thing where I talk about the story so far type of thing. But anyways, guys, hope you guys like this video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Let me know if you're excited for a man-to-man version of original Dungeons & Dragons, which I don't believe anyone is doing. Everyone I've seen doing original Dungeons & Dragons, they're doing the alternative system with D20s, or they're doing the 20-to-1 scale. So I think this is going to be very interesting because it's going to be different in that way. Anyways, guys, I hope you guys like it. Check you guys out in the next video and keep rolling those dice.